All right, so it's just past noon. I think we can go ahead and start. So again, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the public meeting about the Valrico Community Plan. My name is Jay Collins, and with me is Andrea Poppendrew. We are both staff with the Planning Commission. And before the meeting starts, I'll go over a couple of housekeeping items. First being that we are rescheduling our in-person meetings to September, and we hope to have a date and time available later this week. We will send out an email announcement for those meetings, and we'll also post signs in and around the neighborhood. This meeting is being recorded. We will send you a follow-up communication with instructions on where to find the recording and the related materials soon. Next slide, please. Microsoft Teams has a number of options that allow you to add live captions, change the language on the screen materials, adjust high contrast visibility, and more. Just navigate to the three dots at the top of your screen and you can explore these options. One of the options that we'll be testing out today is a raise your hand function. The raise your hand function is how we'd actually like to communicate with you. Let's try that functionality out right now. If you have attended one of our meetings in person or virtually, please enable the hand by raising it with the button right now. Basically, we'd like to know how many of you have attended one of our meetings in the past. So I can see a couple of people have actually raised their hands, and that's great. That means that you've attended a couple of meetings with us. So we welcome comments. Oh, and please do lower your raised hand right now, because again, later on, when we do start having some ask questions and whatnot, and you want to raise your hand, that raise your hand functionality does a first, second, third in a line of order. You can also use the chat function. We'll get to that in a second. So we welcome comments on the project and want to make sure that we document them and have them available in one place. Please place any questions or comments you have in the chat function, and we will answer them in the order that we receive them. We would also add that in addition to the comments this afternoon, written comments be submitted to the project page. This will help us ensure that we capture all comments and that we're able to review them as a staff group, and can ensure that they can be included in any agenda packets that go before the Planning Commission, as well as elected officials during this process. If you have a question or comment about another aspect of the comprehensive plan or another project or development, we ask that you submit these questions directed to planner@plancom.org. And in the chat function, we'll go ahead and put planner@plancom.org for all to have that. We'll do our best to forward your comments and questions to the appropriate team member or outside agency. We are here to listen and look forward to going over our updates and answering any of questions and hearing from community feedback. We have members of Planning Commission staff here who can respond to any technical questions. And again, that will be in the chat function as well for Priya, who can go ahead and help if you have some technical issues that you may have right now. So thank you again for spending this next hour with us. And with that, I'm going to get on with our presentation. If we can go to the next slide, please. So one of the things that we really like to do as we go through these presentations is talk about some of the projects that are outside of the Valrico Community Plan boundary, but impact Valrico. So there are two privately initiated amendments right now in what is called the Energy Industrial Park as a land use category. And those are just outside of the Valrico Community Plan boundary. What we'd like to do here on this slide and the next slide is let you know again that this amendment, HCCPA 2315, talks about secondary uses out in the Energy Industrial Park. And there are two upcoming public hearings. These are public hearings that are open to the public, and the public may comment on the proposed amendment. The first one being August 12th in front of the Planning Commission, and the second being a transmittal public hearing in front of the BOCC on September 26th. Both of those are available are at 601 East Kennedy in downtown Tampa. The Planning Commission is on the 18th floor and the BOCC is on the second floor. Next slide, please. And again, HCCPA 2406 talks about residential consideration also in the Energy Industrial Park. It has a Planning Commission public hearing on October the 14th and a BOCC transmittal public hearing on December the 12th. Again, same thing, downtown 601 East Kennedy on the 18th floor for the Planning Commission, and on the second floor for the Board of County Commissioners. Next slide, please. If you have any questions or comments specific to these amendments, please direct them to the planners that you have up there on the screen. They are with the Planning Commission. They are the case planners who are assigned to these plan amendments. I'll leave that there just for a second. Again, this presentation is available on the Valrico community page website, and you can also, again, contact them through this. Next slide, please. Another study that is ongoing right now, we wanted to introduce this to the Valrico community plan because one of the things that we hear an awful lot about the people who live out there is traffic and congestion. Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway Authority and the Board of County Commissioners are looking at a study along US 301 to actually extend the Leroy Selman Expressway from where it is now basically running into Brandon down 301 to Big Bend Road. You can see in the blue and white right there, that is the extent of the study for this area. So 3O right now is actually doing a listening session, and this is part of it. So they would like to hear from folks about some of the traffic and some of the congestion issues they have, some of their patterns that they have. And again, there may be possibly a entrance and an exit for that expressway on Bloomingdale at 301. Again, it's in a study phase, but that's part of the reason why we would like to have a conversation with now about that. Next slide, please. Again, congestion and safety, resiliency, evacuation concerns. And again, this is something that has been requested by Hillsborough County for the Tampa-Hillsborough Expressway Authority to study. Next slide, please. If you're interested in it, they do have a survey that you can take on this. And then also for additional information, excuse me, if we were actually in Valrico, such as where we were supposed to be earlier this week, we had representatives there. I believe there are representatives from THEA who are on this call who might be able to answer some of that. But again, you can go to their website as well as that QR code, which will help enable you to get to their website and learn a little bit more about this study. Next slide, please. With that, the Board of County Commissioners has requested Planning Commission staff to update the Riverview Community Plan, which again is abutting to the Brandon Community Plan, which abuts to the proposed Valrico Community Plan. So again, we will be out there in the fall and also into next year having conversations with the folks in Riverview, specifically about land use and mobility along US 301 and some of the areas just outside of US 301 as a corridor. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. If you're interested in learning more about Riverview's community plan and when we will be out there in those communities, again, we do have a project webpage. You can actually go online and read from the Livable Communities element, as well as the QR code to get you to that page. And myself and Andrea, just like we are in Valrico, will be the same contact for that for Riverview. Next slide, please. So that's our catch up just for some of the items that are going on around you. So now we're going to actually go into the meat of this presentation and talk about what we've been doing for Valrico since we last met with you. But as we always do first, next slide please, is we like to do a little bit of a recap and tell you basically a little bit about the Planning Commission and about community planning. So the Planning Commission's been around since the 1960s. We are an independent, multi-jurisdictional comprehensive planning agency, and we're led by a board of appointed citizens for all 4 jurisdictions in Hillsborough County. We make recommendations in this instance to the Board of County Commissioners, but we also make recommendations to the City of Tampa, Plant City, and Temple Terrace. Our primary goal that we have for the agency is long-range planning. Your long-range plans are the comprehensive plans. So again, we update and maintain those plans. Next slide, please. So again, where do we look in a hierarchy? There's comprehensive planning, Underneath that, you have elements or sections: future land use section, mobility section, housing section. The livable communities section of the comprehensive plan contains all of the community plans. There are 22 community plans in unincorporated Hillsborough County. Hillsborough County has been doing community planning for just over 20 years now. And one of the big things about community planning is to ensure that the development is consistent with the goals that the community expressed through this process, but also consistent with the comprehensive plan and its edicts. So when you break down through the Valrico community plan, you have vision, goals, and strategies. We've already talked a little bit about visions and goals, and today we're going to talk about some of those strategies. Next slide, please. Again, a community plan is an extension or a refinement of a comprehensive plan, and it provides specific policy to a defined area. Again, we've made mention to this before, and everybody agrees. Valrico is not like Town and Country, which is not like Keystone and Dessa, which is not like Apollo Beach. Next slide, please. Community plans are a collaborative exercise. That's why we have such a robust public engagement. That's why we're out in your communities. It provides a communication channel for the community. Again, this is looking for a holistic approach, and it's looking for folks to actually agree upon some of the ideas behind their community and what they'd like to see for their community. Out of that, you end up having an advocacy tool, and it then informs new development. Next slide, please. So what does it not do? Well, it doesn't build specific structures or businesses. So again, sometimes we have people who say, we would really like to have certain types of restaurants, or we really need a bank. Well, we can always make sure that there are land uses that will allow for that, but it's not necessarily that we would actually be promoting a certain type of development, whether it was a restaurant or a business. That is something that is more specific. That's almost something that you would look at for chambers of commerce and whatnot to help enable. It doesn't, please go back to the next slide. Sorry about that. It doesn't actually affect your school district. It doesn't change addresses. And in the case for Valrico, it does not change your zoning or the land development code, as during this process, we have not heard from the citizens that that is something that they would like to do in their community. Next slide, please. So how do you get involved? You're doing it right now. You're here online at a virtual meeting, but you can also go through our project website. There's social media contacts that we do. The community-wide meetings, again, we would like to mention that we will be making up those meetings that were postponed due to weather from the last weekend. We're looking for times in September and October to do that. And office hours, we'll be back out in the fall again to have office hours. Next slide, please. So again, what have we been doing? Where have we been? Well, we're at almost 250 participants through our community meetings. We're approaching 500 survey responses, and we do have another survey that talks about the strategies that we're almost ready to release. We want to get through these meetings, and then we'll be releasing that so that folks have an opportunity to weigh in on the strategies at their own time and their own leisure. And also through some of those other workshops that we've done, we've had a variety of worksheets. We've had a variety of mapping projects that folks have done with us, and we've had 3 presentations to community groups. We are available to come out to your HOAs, your Chamber of Commerce, your church groups, whatever they may be, and have a presentation to your community. We would like to stress that we're getting towards the end of this project. So it's really important that if your group is interested in having us come and speak to them, now is the time to do that. Next slide, please. So again, what do we do with all of that feedback? That feedback is what goes into the development of your plan and the deliverables. That being the vision statement, the concept map, the plan goals, and the plan strategies. And I'll also say that what Andrea is going to go over with you today, we've already vetted with a variety of county organizations and county departments. And I think with that, I'm now going to hand over the presentation to Andrea, who's going to take you through the strategies. And then I'll be back at the end to help answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Good afternoon, everybody. Andrea Pappinger. I'm a senior planner with Plan Hillsborough, and as Jay mentioned, I'm working with him on the Valrico community plan. So on the screen before you is the draft vision for the Valrico Community Plan. And this is based on feedback from the previous community meetings, activities, and surveys that Jay mentioned earlier. So the community plan is, I'm going to hit some of the highlights for this vision. The full document, if you'd like to see it, is on the Valrico Community Plan website. The community plan will focus on maintaining Valrico's community character, which includes compatibility of new development, and I'll discuss that a bit more in the next few slides. The plan also envisions the community to have pedestrian-friendly connections, preserved trees, and open space, and infrastructure improvements. So the next 5 slides, we're going to show the draft 4 goals and a sampling of the strategies proposed for the goals. And I say a sampling of strategies because the draft plan right now is about 5 pages. And if we presented every single thing on that plan, we'd be here all day with you. So Jay is going to post the link in the chat for where you can find that draft plan if you'd like to view the whole document. But the next few slides, I'm going to hit some of the highlights and the high points that we've heard from comments from the Valrico community so far. So our first goal 1 is on infrastructure. So from previous community meetings and handouts and surveys, what we've heard from the community is that infrastructure needs to keep up with development, and more improvements are needed to reduce traffic and increase safety. So part of improving that infrastructure is looking at identifying funding and alternative funding sources. And as Jay mentioned previously, community plans, they don't deal with any changes to your taxes, but what we're talking about is a few other options that we can look at. So grant opportunities may be one, or maybe partnering with other state agencies to look at, State Road 60 improvements. So goal 2 is on development, specifically supporting development that is compatible with Valrico's overall character and its neighborhoods. So folks have indicated to us in previous meetings that the new growth coming in needs to be compatible with the existing community. So when we talk about compatibility, we mean new commercial development that fits the character of the area. So for example, maybe discouraging some of those strip mall, strip commercial developments, encouraging new development, redevelopment with tree protection, plenty of connectivity like sidewalks, and a compatible height and scale with other buildings, in Valrico community. So one of those strategies for goal 2 does include supporting a neighborhood node at the Bloomingdale Avenue and Lithia Pinecrest Road intersection. And the image before you shows the draft boundaries of that node outlined in pink. So the idea of a node is not to come in and get rid of the parks or the Bloomingdale Library or the schools, that are shown in the image, but it's to discuss maybe more multiple uses that can occur at this intersection. So it would create a focal point for the community, and this would be the appropriate area for more redevelopment. Now, commercial development and intensification would still be compatible with the character of Valrico. When we talk about commercial intensification, it's kind of envisioning this area for future consideration where every parcel is used, and it becomes more of the center of your neighborhood for activity. So we don't mean commercial intensive uses like more mini storage or auto repair. What we mean is maybe, a 1-story retail or a 2-story office or a 2-story mixed use building with retail on the bottom and people living above. Additionally, identify a neighborhood node for a community plan. When there's a rezoning, you as the community can, if you come to a public meeting, can say, hey, our community plan says where we want more commercial redevelopment, and it's right here at this node. And this strategy comes from feedback that we've heard at previous meetings about keeping that commercial property kind of, clustered and more away from the residential areas. Third goal is mobility, so improving access to walking and biking, safe routes to facilities like schools and parks, and improving the overall transportation network are common themes that we've heard throughout our outreach. So we've heard from the community that there are some connectivity issues like sidewalk gaps and prioritizing new development or redevelopment to provide those sidewalks. We've also seen from previous surveys main themes that have focused on relieving that traffic congestion, providing safer crosswalks, sidewalks, and bike paths, especially to some of our community facilities like our schools and our parks and our public services. And then lastly, we've also heard some comments on enforcing some truck route regulations. And then our last goal was on the environment and recreation. So that looks at enhancing existing parks, not only a network of sidewalks and bikes for development, but also one that allows folks to reach these parks and recreation inside and maybe outside of the Valrico community. Stormwater management could be anything from putting a trail around a large stormwater pond, or maybe just improving the natural drainage in the area. So protecting Valrico's natural environments, especially the tree canopy, and more park and recreation opportunities have come up in a variety of our surveys and community meetings throughout our outreach. So for the next steps, we are taking what we've heard from our virtual meetings today and also the future rescheduled in-person meetings to refine this draft plan. We're working with the library right now to reschedule our in-person meetings that were postponed from the storm, so we don't have a date for you yet, but we will soon. As Jay mentioned, we also have a survey and office hours coming up this fall as well to get additional feedback. And tentatively, we are anticipating the amendment for the community plan to go through in the January 2025 cycle, which would mean public hearings in March or April. So our contact information is on the screen with the project website link that's, I believe, also has been shared in the chat. Feel free to reach out myself or Jay at any time with any questions. And as Jay mentioned, we are available for presentations if you have an HOA or community group that would like for us to come out. So we've gone through some of the highlights of those draft strategies, and we really like to hear from the community on kind of what you think. Are we going in the right direction? So I'm going to leave the housekeeping slide up for a second so we can, for folks that came a little bit later to the meeting, we have the chat feature. So if you want to put questions and comments in there, we will go through those. And then we also have the raise hand button. So if you'd like to click the raise hand button, we will unmute you so you can ask us a question. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the screen if that's all right, so that Jay and I can make sure we get all the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. And I'm looking through the meeting chat right now, and I don't believe I see any comments or questions from the meeting participants. So again, if you are interested in asking us a question by, I'm sorry, Tyreek?
Yeah, it looks like we have Susie in the chat. She asked, how will the plan be enforced?
Sure. So the plan is enforced through a variety of different mechanisms. Obviously, if you're talking about land use, the final say on land use is the Board of County Commissioners. If you're talking about issues with maybe code enforcement, well, then that's code enforcement. So this is enforced just like any of the other community plans or any of the other policy that you would have within the comprehensive plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County.
Susie also wrote, density of housing is important. Will that be addressed? Example, 2 homes per acre.
So right now, the majority of Valrico's residential property actually has a land use classification of 4 units to the acre. That's the land use, not the zoning. Those are obviously 2 different things. 4 units to the acre is pretty much the bottom of the type of densities as a land use category we see in the urban service area. The urban service area are those areas where you have water and sewer, that is the public water and sewer, meaning you're not on a septic system or your own private well. We do know that there are a number of residents in Valrico who are on their own well and septic systems and want to remain on their own well and septic systems. But again, they still have a land use of 4 units to the acre, and they may have a different zoning. Again, we do have a variety of different strategies that talk about compatible development, and the majority of your area is single family detached. You actually have a higher percentage of single family detached housing in Valrico than you do as the whole of unincorporated Hillsborough County. And I think that we do a good job through the conversations that we've had with you of actually capturing that in some of the strategies for compatibility for current and future development in your area.
Jay, Susie has another question. Will the height or stories be addressed?
So height specifically, like 35 feet, 60 feet, is not something that is actually dealt with in the comprehensive plan. That is specific to zoning. Again, what we do talk about is compatible development to height, scale, mass, bulk, right? So again, that is to say that when you have single family detached next to single family detached, a 2-story house and a 1-story house next to one another would be considered compatible because again, they are single family detached homes. If you're talking about a single family home next to a 6-story office building, that would be something that would definitely be a different thing to look at for compatibility because you have to take into account the land use, the zoning, and a variety of other factors. But on its face, height is something that is controlled at the zoning layer. And we talk primarily about compatibility of those uses.
Thank you, Jay. We have another question. Could you talk a little bit more about the node concept? More specifically, will the current forested areas be developed and the current shops closed or changed?
No, when we talk about
Andrea, yeah, I was
sorry.
going to say, Andrea, please.
No, so when we talk about the node, we're not saying we're going to start closing shops or anything like that. What we're saying is this is more of a neighborhood node that envisions for the community kind of the future considerations for this area. So what we heard through our outreach is kind of keeping that commercial property away from the residential areas and clustered more at an intersection. So we're thinking this idea of a node is not to get rid of what's there, but as new redevelopment or development comes in, that's where we want to see that commercial development. And now, obviously, as I stated, we're not talking about bringing in 3-story surface self-storage buildings, but something that's more compatible with the character of the area so that when you do get to that rezoning phase, you can say in our community plan, this is where we say we want more commercial development. It's at this node. Jay, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I was just going to say a good portion of the node is developed today with a variety of uses, whether they are retail like the Walmart that's there, or if it's medical that you have out there, or it's public uses like the park or the library. So we're not talking about, as Andrea said, expanding the uses that are there. It's more of the idea of in the future when you redevelop, that's the appropriate location for it. So if the medical facility expands itself in the future, or if Walmart decides that it looks at changing its layout, that's the area where it should be, not elsewhere in your community. It's to support the idea of a node there. And with that node, we also acknowledge the fact that you're looking for an opportunity to be able to get there easier. So whether that is walking, biking, or driving, that's an area that needs to have improvements for mobility.
Thank you. We have a question regarding the question is the median between road and business defined? New businesses on 60 I assume the question is, will new businesses on 60 have more green space? Susie, please correct me if I got that question wrong.
So State Road 60, a couple of things. It is a state road, so it's a state facility. Once you leave the right-of-way for State Road 60, obviously unincorporated Hillsborough County controls the land use. There is already an overlay on State Road 60 and it's already codified. So there's already some land use requirements, buffering requirements and whatnot on State Road 60. And we can go ahead and put that also in the chat off of Muni Code, what those requirements are. And that's one of the reasons why on the concept map, if you look at that, which again is available on the project website, you'll see, I think it's a blue dashed line going down a good portion of State Road 60 because that has been codified as an overlay for development along State Road 60 for quite a while. It's been a number of years.
Thank you. We do have a follow-up question, but I do want to acknowledge that there is a comment from Bruce in the chat. Bruce, we've got your comment in here, but I would encourage you to go to the project page so that we can capture it in the public comment box on there. The question that Susie has is, will Valrico have buffering and green space?
Andrea, you want to tackle that with what's already existing for code language, and then
Yes, I was
plan?
just grabbing that land development code link
Oh, I'm
for
sorry.
Susie to put in the chat for her here. So I'm sorry, I missed that question.
I can go ahead and comment. So again, we did not. So when you get down to the nuts and bolts of how one home relates to another home, or one home relates to a business, like buffering and screening, the specifics of it is something that is held in the zoning code. So through this process, what we have done is we have set up language that says Valrico is looking for greater buffering and screening between its single-family residential homes and other uses. Now, what that becomes is basically would be a phase 2 if there was actually to become an overlay for Valrico that says, hey, everywhere else in the county between a single-family home and a business, you're supposed to have a buffer of X. Well, Valrico now has a buffer of Y. So that is something that would be a second phase of all of this, right? Because that's like what you have up on State Road 60 that's already been codified in the land development code. What we were doing during this process is to take the holistic big look idea of what Valrico wants to see in its future, which does include some of that buffering and screening, but we don't get down into the specifics of it because, again, that's not what the comprehensive plan does. It lays out the vision and the overall theme of what the community is after, but the specifics of how that would be delivered is something that would be in the land development code. Now, I'll say this about that. At this time, we do not have a second phase that would do that. So if you say, well, the whole of the county is X and we want Y, you're still working within the premise of what your Y is what's in this document, which is to say that what is important to the people of Valrico is the buffering and screening between these uses. But what that buffering and screening requirement would be would still be what is adopted, whether you are in Valrico or other areas of the county, such as in Brandon or Riverview or elsewhere for residential 4 properties. I hope that helped. I know that's kind of wordy, and so we can always have another conversation about that. And again, another thing with all of that is a lot of you live in HOAs. And HOAs, some of you have some language specific in your HOAs about some of the buffering and screening that you have within your own communities that are above and beyond what the code requires. And that's a different issue entirely.
Yeah, we do have under goal 2 one of the strategies to make sure that new residential development that does come in is reviewed for compatibility measures that includes that height and buffering and screening. So it is in there that staff's going to review it. Just, each new rezoning is a special case, and so we're giving them the language so that they can review for those compatibility measures.
Thank you both. We have another question. This question is regarding, there are concerns about the traffic near the node. So the question is, how will the roads handle more traffic to handle more development?
Andrea, you want that, or you want me to try that one?
Sure. I'll go ahead and Jay, jump in, add in anything that I miss. So great question. So we do have, for the neighborhood node, that is, kind of, as I said, envisioning this area for future development or redevelopment. But we do realize that if you add more, commercial businesses to an area, there's going to be more traffic. We do have a strategy under our goal 1, which looks at our infrastructure, about providing that infrastructure that supports the existing and proposed development. So we have those 2 strategies in there to kind of work hand in hand so that the area develops, that new proposed development infrastructure is supported.
Right. And to add to what Andrea said is that much of that area is already developed. So a lot of it is to look to say that when you have future development there, that's an area that should be redeveloped with commercial uses, and then start having some of those conversations that Andrea talked about, whether it's buffering and screening that Susie brings up, or it's some of the stuff that Andrea brought up with connectivity, whether it's additional for vehicles such as the turning lanes that would be required for some types of development, or if it's just pedestrian connections between sites or off of the main sidewalk in. Again, in Hillsborough County, there are mobility fees. Those mobility fees are paid by whether it's you buying a single family home or it's the developer building a Walmart that actually provide for transportation improvements throughout this area. Also, I think it's important to mention that the idea of it is not to disperse commercial development and have strict commercial development elsewhere in the area, such as on Dover or Durant or Morenin or any of these other roads that you have that are primarily residential and public serving uses like schools and churches. So those areas of your community that today have commercial uses, I think it's imperative from what I've heard from the community that they remain commercial. And when somebody is looking to have commercial uses in your community, this community point that those are the areas that are appropriate and not have the commercial expand to other areas within the community. Again, as I say, I'm saying that for what I've heard from the community through this process.
I know we had a few folks join late in the meeting. Just want to let you know that we are recording this, and this recording is going to be on our website along with the presentation. And you can also go on the community plan project website and leave a comment or call Jay and I if you have other questions as we go through this process. I think we have another question. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, we do have another question that came through. Susie mentioned that Bloomingdale has been negatively impacted by corporate rentals. Is there any way we could require homes to be owned for 1 year prior to the homes be rented out?
Yeah, so Susie, as you know, we did look into this. We went to the county attorney's office that provided us with some information when the Board of County Commissioners requested basically somewhat similar question that you did to the county attorney's office. The short answer is that the board did not take any action on that. So as of right now, the only thing that we do have on rentals that is in the code that is countywide deals with short-term rentals. You're not supposed to have a short-term rental under 30 days in unincorporated Hillsborough County, but there is nothing on the books that talks about corporate rentals for long-term or for you or I or anyone else to have to own a property for a year prior to renting it out. And again, for that to be taken up, whether it's for Valrico or any other community, it would have to be taken up by the Board of County Commissioners. Lizzie, any other questions out there right now?
No, that was the last one. Susie says thank you.
I do not see any raised hands.
All right,
well,
thanks,
we threw a
Tyree.
lot out, folks. We threw a lot at you folks, so we can hang out for a few minutes and just see if there's any other questions. But if not, you can always call Jay and I or drop us a comment on our website.
And also tonight, again at 6 o'clock, we will be having another one of these virtual meetings as a way that hopefully the community can go ahead and engage with us, since we had to postpone the meetings out at the library from this past weekend. So if you do have some other questions and you're like, well, I forgot something, you can join us tonight between 6 and 7.
So I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. I'm not seeing any other raised hands. Lizzie, let me know if I've missed anything.
We just got one question that came through from Laura. It is regarding the rentals, and let's see.
Oh, the rental.
Do the
I think-
rentals and do the rentals
think, Jay-
include Airbnb rentals?
Yeah, so again, there is a regulation in unincorporated Hillsborough County that no residential property is supposed to be rented. This is my interpretation of it. The county attorney's office might, again, be the one to ask this. That no residential property is supposed to be rented for less than 30 days. So, and how is that enforced? That's enforced through code enforcement. So again, if you live next to a property and, for lack of better words, it's a party house where every weekend there's people coming and going, that may be an illegal rental. And the path forward for you, if you so choose, would be to contact code enforcement. If that is the question, I might have cut you off and I apologize for that.
I'm posting the county attorney office website that has their contact info as well.
Sure. And again, code enforcement is who you would call about whether or not the regulation should be enforced. And then the county attorney's office would be able to provide for you that information. And also, again, since it is a regulation, I unfortunately don't have it off the top of my head. It should be in the Land Development Code, which again is something that is available through Muni Code. Maybe that's something we might be able to find for the 6 o'clock meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
Laura said that was indeed her question. Thank you. And I did not see any other questions come in.
All right. There's nothing else. I think we'll give you your 15 minutes of your lunch hour back. And thank you for joining us. Appreciate all the input. And as Jay said, we'll be back at 6 p.m. to help for the next meeting.
Thanks, everybody.